Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
We will have a Made in BC province-wide plan.
Why BC is getting closer to easing restrictions on daily life and business activity. Also,
our labor has also gone up, and so have the expenses, obviously.
Businesses begin tapping into Ottawa's $73 billion wage subsidy program. And
as some golf courses reopen, how coronavirus is changing the way the game is played.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening. If you are wondering when things could start reopening in British Columbia, you may be finding out soon.
BC's top doctor says they'll share details in due time. Dan Burritt joins us live with the latest. Dan, what do we know today?
Not much in terms of a timeline. We know many people, including workers and business owners, though, they all want to know. Well, we got some hints today. Dr. Bonnie Henry says the data suggests BC is getting closer to where it might be possible to lift some restrictions on work and life, but it must be done in a careful Made in BC approach. We know many businesses have closed, workers have been laid off or asked to work from home. Other stores have shifted to online sales and restaurants have pivoted to just takeout. Many are wondering when some of those restrictions might be lifted. Henry says the details will be coming. However,
some things will not change. We're not going to go back to having lots of people together in enclosed spaces and having meetings and having those opportunities where people can mix and mingle and transmit this virus amongst each other and then bring it home to their families and their communities.
Henry says restarting the economy will depend on employers taking proper care of their workers through protective measures and not penalizing employees for taking sick days. We know some shops and stores have drastically increased their cleaning. Another big question has been around schools. When might students here in BC go back, considering Quebec has announced plans to get students back into class by May? Henry says they're not looking at summer school here, though some students might be back by the end of this school year. She thinks they have a chance to support children of essential workers, but again, no timeline on that quite yet.
And we do know there is a Ministry of Education news conference tomorrow to address that as well, so hopefully we'll have more details. Dan, what are the latest numbers from the province on COVID-19?
Well, first of all, 3 more people have died in BC. That's 103 people we've lost so far. We have 50 new cases of the disease and 97 are in hospital. But the number of people in intensive care continues to go down. Just under 2,000 people are confirmed to have COVID-19, and more than half of those people have now recovered. So that's the good news. Anita?
Thanks very much, Dan.
Well, some are skeptical. Others say it's thoroughly welcome.
Businesses across the country are now applying for the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy. As Tina Lovegreen reports, the program can cover up to 75% of wages for those affected by COVID that have seen a drop in revenue.
Once known for their coffees and pastries, now their bread and butter is groceries.
People could come and either pick things up and we could run them out to their car for them, or we're happy to do local delivery as well.
Adapting as best they can to this new reality, from outlining where people need to stand to allowing only staff inside the store. And since we couldn't go in, we asked them to do some filming for us.
We pack our grocery orders in this area here. Our revenue has been pretty steady. It's actually up a little bit, which has been fantastic, but it is a little tricky because our labor has also gone up and so have the expenses. Obviously, margins on groceries aren't quite the same as cafe items, but we've been so grateful for all the community support.
And the wage subsidy from the federal government should help too.
We qualify for the 10%. I don't know that we qualify for any more than that because our revenue hasn't dropped.
But for others who have lost revenue, the subsidy could cover up to 75% of wages.
Business right now looks exactly like this. It's slow moving, a lot of takeout, a lot of delivery, and the occasional walker by.
A popular brunch spot now facing an 80% loss a week. And that's even with trying to come up with innovative ways to stay afloat, like selling fresh eggs. They've had to lay off their hourly staff, like cooks, servers, and bartenders. But the wage subsidy might mean they can do some rehiring.
We're going through that process now, figuring out what we can get and try to get as much as we can, and if we can, potentially bring more team members back into the fold so we can continue to operate.
And get back to serving up brunch like they used to. Tina Lovegreen, CBC News, Vancouver.
People living in a tent city in Victoria and Vancouver are slowly being moved out into hotel rooms. This comes 2 days after the BC government enacted a public safety order.
But as Jesse Johnston reports, politicians have tried and failed in the past to dismantle the camp at Oppenheimer Park on the downtown east side.
I'm looking forward to it. Yeah. At least it'll be warm.
Slowly but surely, people like Jacob Stewart, who's lived at Oppenheimer Park for 6 months, are moving into the hundreds of hotel rooms the province has leased.
Get the shower, get to sit down, relax, watch TV, It's just my good time to isolate, right?
The plan is to move 15 to 20 people per day into their new accommodations. The hope is most will be as excited about the transition as Stewart, who can't wait for a little quiet time.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to studying my math again and, do my reading again. Writing my journal. Yeah. You can't really do that here. There's just no peace, eh?
History suggests getting everyone to go won't be easy. The last time politicians tried to dismantle the camp, it didn't work. But the province believes that now, in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic, things will be different.
Last time, I think they moved about 100, 120 people out. And then, as you say, the park repopulated at that time. So our focus, we think over the next couple of weeks, we think the vast majority of people are going to be willing to move.
But moving comes with questions. The chatter today around the encampment's secret fire, concerns about how much stuff they can bring with them to their hotels, what happens to their pets, and at what point do the police show up and tell them to leave.
I think it's an opportunity to do something differently than what the government's ever done, and I hold out a tiny bit of hope that we can create something peaceful out of this.
The province's deadline to transition everyone out of the encampment and the 2 tent cities in Victoria is May 9th. But it's still anyone's guess what Oppenheimer Park will look like on May 10th. Jesse Johnston, CBC News, Vancouver.
A woman who has been missing for nearly 2 months in New Westminster has been found dead. 44-year-old Nirla Sharma was last seen by her family inside her New Westminster home. Police were alerted on Sunday to a report of a body on the shoreline of the Fraser River on the border of New Westminster and Burnaby. According to Sharma's family, she left without her debit and credit cards, and they didn't know of any reason why she would have. The BC Coroner Service is working to determine the cause of death, but police say no foul play is suspected at this time.
Well, 2 city-run golf courses in Vancouver and Van Dusen Gardens is reopening this week. The Fraser View and McMurray courses will unlock the links under the new conditions of physical distancing for safety, of course. Golfers will have to book online, and only credit and debit cards are being accepted. They're being asked not to show up more than 20 minutes before tee times and leave right after their round. They will not be allowed to touch the flagstick either. As for Van Dusen Garden, well, visitors will have to buy tickets online for designated time slots, and only 30 visitors will be allowed into the garden during each time. All right, time now to check in with meteorologist Brett Soderholm. Brett, will any of us be visiting Van Dusen anytime soon? With this weather, of course.
Well, I would say if you... Yeah, of course, if you would be looking for a day, kind of like what we're seeing right now with lots of sunshine, really calm winds, you're going to need to be waiting until essentially late week for that, because for tomorrow and Wednesday, we're still looking at sort of unsettled conditions. That means periods of showers can be expected here and there. I do want to show you what it looked like this morning, though, on our satellite and radar imagery going on. It was kind of an active way to start the day. We had quite a few showers, especially in toward Abbotsford and the Fraser Valley, and we're even reports of a few thunder showers going coming through. Now you can tell clearly not looking at much happening at this point in time, and that trend's going to be continuing right through the overnight period. Now current temperatures, this is exactly where we should be. We got up to about 15 degrees earlier today at Vancouver Airport, and we can see many places all across the lower mainland into that similar ballpark range of temperatures. So we are pretty seasonal when you consider all of that. In terms of a forecast look ahead, just really briefly, we're still going to be looking at relatively clear skies throughout the overnight tonight. Low temperatures really not going to be changing all that much from where we're at. We're only going to be going down to about 7 degrees or so tomorrow morning. Expect a nice buildup of cloud cover, but by the afternoon and evening, that's when we're going to get into another round of showers. So if you like a little bit of a variety, there's going to be something for everyone this week. We have periods of showers, we have periods of sunshine, and all of that is going to be the way that we're going to be finishing off the month of April, because the month of May is going to be continuing in just a couple of days. I believe it's going to be on Friday, and I'll have your full forecast when I come back.
Looking forward to it. Thanks, Brett.
Okay, crowds hunting for elusive products like toilet paper, yeast, and pasta, lineups around big box grocers.
Many people are feeling wary about heading out for food. So we asked the question, is the corner grocer making a comeback? Take a look.
With COVID, what's interesting with COVID is that there could be a reset in terms of how the landscape, the food retail landscape will look like coming out of this.
I think people are maybe not wanting to get into their car to line up for 45 minutes, half an hour in the big box stores, and only to get there to be disappointed and only find maybe 20% of what they're looking for, as I've heard over and over again.
These mom and pop shops actually have an opportunity to grab a piece of the marketplace just because there are gaps and people just want food.
Well, it's impacted it in the sense that we are definitely busier. We have noticed new faces come through. I'm thinking part that these people are now able to work remotely, or unfortunately they have been laid off, lost their jobs. So I'm seeing an increase in traffic and an increase of new faces.
So we survey Canadians every week. As of last week, 52% of Canadians were trying to avoid the grocery store. So that's the majority of Canadians who don't want to be in a grocery store. Some of them have to go, but the majority don't want to be there.
We try to go that extra mile for them. We take requests and I try to fill them whenever possible. So knowing their spending habits, buying habits, etc., knowing more about them than them just coming in and being another face.
When you go to a smaller store, you kind of forget a little bit. You're allowed to forget that you're in the middle of a pandemic, because that personalization, personalizing the service, the experience is much easier when you're dealing with a few customers at a time. So I absolutely appreciate that.
Perfect. Definitely good news for these stories. I mean, we've done several stories in the past where we talk so much about how the corner store is dying and really hard to revive at all. So I'm sure this is quite welcome for a lot of them.
Yeah, it sure is, and you're right. A lot of people thought they were going the way of the dinosaur, but they've survived, and in some cases are flourishing now. So there you go. Just a quick reminder, you can watch this newscast live on CBC Gem. The free app is also where you'll find other CBC programs. And CBC Vancouver is also on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. Well, from Michigan to Mississippi, the name of the game, opening up. We're going to take you to one COVID-19 hotspot, the state of Georgia, where they seem to be ignoring the science and going with instinct. And thanks for watching online. For more news coverage during the television commercial break. Well, a lot of us are spending a lot more time on the inside looking out these days.
But in one Edmonton community, they aren't just looking at signs of daily life. They're watching for something positively prehistoric. Alicia Asquith explains.
Giggles fill the air on a sunny afternoon in the community of Summerside as this bright orange T-Rex clumsily shakes her tail at an impromptu sidewalk dance party. The antics are courtesy of Mama Rex, otherwise known as Julie Armstrong.
It's just fun. Like, life is serious. It's fun to have fun. Who wouldn't be a T-Rex?
Armstrong got the T-Rex costume for Christmas after coveting one for years and has certainly been making the most out of it.
Sometimes I parent in it. Sometimes parenting can be kind of like, so when they're, having their day. So sometimes chasing them makes me feel better in a T-Rex costume and usually turns the mood around.
With no work and the kids out of school, she began to take regular walks in costume to keep her own spirits up during this pandemic. It wasn't long, though, before Mama Rex and her escapades were a sensation with neighbors, too. Photos and video swarming social media.
I'm a person who gets happy when other people are happy. So for my own mental health and my well-being during this time, it makes me happy seeing other people happy. So why not go out there and dress as a T-Rex?
Big fans of Mama Rex, Colette Galtis and her daughter Emily have been keeping a regular eye out for the great orange reptile, going so far as to create this giant obstacle course in chalk outside their home, delighted to see her attempt it.
She did frog jumps. She had T-Rex arms so she couldn't touch her toes.
It's been getting tougher and tougher on the kids, so it just adds a little bit of just some more smiles and a little bit of extra joy, for sure. So it's definitely the highlight of our week.
Armstrong figures she's covered about 60% of the neighborhood. Her goal is to hit every street, keeping her distance while bringing the community together. Alicia Asquith, CBC News, Edmonton.
We'll be back in a few moments with more COVID-19 news, but before that, here's an excerpt from last night's Stronger Together virtual concert. Canadian musicians, actors, athletes, and activists all took part to raise money for food banks. Taking us away are Michael Bublé, the Bare Naked Ladies, and Sophia Reyes, and their song, Gotta Be Patient.
And every day we'll sing a song to make you dance until they say, well, I just wanna see my friends. I wanna walk the street again, but I gotta be patient. So let's enjoy this combination. So I gotta be patient. Let's enjoy this combination. I gotta be patient. So let's enjoy this combination.
From Michigan to Mississippi, a dozen or so U.S. states are opening up again for non-essential business. And as the CBC's Katie Simpson shows us tonight, it's one of the last states to close up shop during the COVID crisis that is now one of the first to reopen.
You'd never know, stay-at-home orders here have been relaxed. At this breakfast joint, there are more staff members than customers.
Any potatoes and a biscuit? Thank you.
And most orders are being picked up by food couriers. Servers understand customers are afraid, but say safety precautions are in place.
It's overboard. We're crazy sanitizing. I mean, they gave me this mask. They made it for me. I'm not worried because is a hospital person worried? We're doing the same things that hospitals do.
Restaurant dining rooms now join hair salons and beauty parlors as some of the non-essential businesses allowed to operate in Georgia.
It's about time. My guests are definitely ready to have their faces waxed.
Physical distancing rules are supposed to be enforced, but it's hard to avoid touching a customer's nose and mouth when giving an upper lip wax.
I don't feel like they would have opened up if there was any chance of us getting sick or hurt while we're in there.
Few people seemed willing to embrace Georgia's great reopening, though much of the country is watching to see if it can be done safely. There is doubt about that, since COVID-19 cases are on the rise here, and there is a lag in testing.
If you're that afraid, stay at home,
and just don't come out, you know? So for people who are afraid, there's a remedy for that. They just stay at home.
Willie Edwards didn't have that choice. He reopened his barbershop because he didn't qualify for benefits.
I got a vehicle that I can't pay for. I got rent that I can't pay for. So yeah, it's a hardship.
Business so far has been slow. Another sign that just because you open it doesn't mean people will come. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Atlanta, Georgia.
Well, Dr. Teresa Tam has been the public face of Canada's fight against COVID-19, but she has also faced questioning about advice she's given as our country's chief public health officer. Tam now says some measures could have been better executed and perhaps happened sooner. CBC's chief political correspondent, Rosemary Barton, spoke with Dr. Tam for her first sit-down interview since the pandemic began.
By January 14th, the WHO was saying there may have been human-to-human transmission, just may. By January 22nd, they said there was some evidence of that. And yet, through that period, we, as a country, still decided to continue to let travelers arrive from China, as many as 58,000, more than 2,000 from Hubei province. And we were only screening at that point, correct me if I'm mistaken, symptomatic passengers. I'm wondering if we should not have been doing more at that point, given that there was already some evidence that this was being transmitted from human to human.
Yes, so it's always good to sort of look back and see, what actually happened. And that was when we had previously then instituted this enhanced border measures, where we provided information to all travelers from China to watch out for symptoms, etc. That was actually quite effective in that our initial travelers actually did very well in that they followed advice. In the end, in terms of travelers from China, if I recall correctly, throughout this whole period, until the beginning of March, we had about 10 travel-related cases, and they were all managed very well. So, could we have done more at the time? You can retrospectively say, yes, absolutely. You could screen more, or you could change your stance. But at the time, we had very, very few cases globally and in Canada.
And you can see more of Rosemary Barton's exclusive interview with Dr. Tam tonight on The National. That's at 10 o'clock on CBC television.
CBC News has learned that an employee at the South Surrey Walmart has tested positive for COVID-19. They last worked on April 16th, and anyone who was at the store and had prolonged contact is told to isolate. Now, fears of shopping have driven people to go online for grocery delivery, but huge demand has led to long waits, unexpected cancellations, and some online orders, and also hidden costs. Rosa Marcatelli looks at those struggling while staying at home during the pandemic.
Here's my fridge.
Angela Keller gave us a video tour of what's not in her fridge. The 70-year-old was told her online order with Loblaws would arrive in 10 days, only to have it postponed several times and then flat out canceled.
I get an email saying, your delivery has been canceled. Please click this link to reorder. And my first thought was, my goodness, I'm going to have to wait another week and a half to 2 weeks.
Loblaws says online orders have doubled in recent weeks, but cancellations are rare. Grocery stores and their delivery partners are working to catch up with that demand. But for now, they lack the staff and technology to keep up, says this food economics expert.
All of a sudden, we've seen this huge spike, and they've been overwhelmed in terms of the demand.
Demand is one thing, cost another. Medea Chaudhry placed an online order while she and her family were in quarantine after returning from the UK. She ordered through Instacart. It's a popular third-party shopping and delivery company. It advertises in-store prices for many of the stores it delivers for. Customers usually only see the Instacart receipt, but in Chaudhry's case, the original store receipt was also left with her order. And when she compared the two, she realized she was charged more than 20% extra per item, in addition to service and delivery fees.
I felt a little taken advantage of, because to fulfill my obligations from coming back from overseas, I had to use an online delivery.
Instacart tells CBC its pricing reflects standard Shoppers Drug Mart store pricing. And in Chaudhry's case, it says in-store promotions were not available online. Overall, experts say expect problems with the sudden surge in demand for these services. Their advice when ordering groceries for delivery or pickup, plan weeks ahead and look to smaller retailers like bakeries and specialty stores in your area. Some are now taking orders over the phone or by email and have started delivering. Rosa Marcatelli, CBC News, Calgary.
It has been more than a week now since the horrific rampage in Nova Scotia that left 22 people dead. And more stories about its impact are being shared, including what it was like in the local emergency room. As Carolyn Ray reports, the small emergency room at the Truro Hospital found itself in an unimaginable situation, dealing with a mass shooting in the middle of a pandemic.
It was a situation staff in this hospital trained for, skills they never thought they'd use. Late last Saturday, they got the call. Several people shot in nearby Portapique.
As soon as we got the initial notification that we might be receiving patients, we jumped into action.
Hospital staff have been reluctant to talk about what happened. They feel their efforts pale in comparison to those who risked their lives out in the field. But inside the hospital, the pandemic actually worked in their favor. They had extra staff, some empty beds. It was a quiet night. 4 different health centers in this region were locked down. The Truro police came to guard the doors. While they can't say how many victims were brought to each site, all they can say is that it was personal.
Because we're so well connected, there's no one in our department that hasn't been affected in some way.
As the night went on, the mood changed. The rampage left 22 dead. Only a few survived.
I'm not sure I can describe the stillness of an emergency department that's waiting to receive victims that don't come. So, yeah, it got emotional for sure.
There are few words to describe the emotions. Loss is everywhere. But as people grieve, they've started to seek help. Many have been traumatized or triggered by the killings. They're turning to the emergency department, something the hospital suspects will continue for months.
We are prepared for what is going to come through our door, and that despite being heartbroken about what's happened, we'll continue to serve the community in whatever way we can.
The hospital has received condolences and messages from across the country. It's that comfort that is helping them move forward after suffering such incredible loss. Carolyn Ray, CBC News, Truro.
Well, Translink is losing more than $75 million a month. Could that have been avoided, and how much worse could things get? After the break, CEO Kevin Desmond is here.
And more news coverage for you now as we stay online during the television commercial break. Well, in some sectors, in some parts of Canada and around the world, the easing of COVID-19 restrictions has begun or is in the planning phase.
But the Prime Minister cautions that doesn't mean a return to the way we were.
Normal is something that is a long way off for all of us. And if we want life to get back to the way it was exactly before, it won't. There will be differences, even a few years from now, that we will have learned from dealing with this global pandemic that I think will be important lessons.
Ottawa and the provinces are working on guidelines for places where restrictions are loosened. Because there is still no proof that having had the virus makes you immune to reinfection, keeping your distance is critical.
All right, looking for something to perhaps keep you busy? How about planting a vegetable garden?
As Ali Chiasson reports, a new initiative gets people growing fruits and vegetables they can share with their neighbors.
Still got herbs like dill and cilantro. We've got squash.
The gardening movement is real and it is organized.
Beans, peas.
By people like this guy.
Perfect backdrop, by the way.
I'm a plant nerd, yeah.
Mark Stewart came up with the Food Upfront program as a way to get neighbors to reconnect with nature.
We've got 2 categories of participants. We've got people who just want to grow their own Food Upfront garden and display a Food Upfront sign. So we're dropping off seed packet or two to those people to just get them growing.
The other folks are serious gardeners who've committed to turning their front lawns into vegetable gardens.
The idea there is to help people organize their communities and develop food streets so that you can walk up and down the street and see tomatoes and squash and lettuce growing and share the produce amongst everyone.
This is the little front lawn that we're going to turn into food production this year.
About 200 people and counting have signed up, like Leslie Anderson.
I am not an experienced green thumb. I only recently left Condoville downtown, so this is very much a brand new adventure for me, which is part of the fun of it. With my children, it gives me a chance now that we get to grow together. The little one gets to think about seasons and weather. They get to learn about how plants grow. They get to play in dirt, and every kid loves dirt.
Yes.
The older kid, we get to talk about food systems and all of the invisible labor that happens connected to all of the food that we eat. It doesn't just magically appear in the grocery store the way we tend to think it does.
Mark Stewart personally delivered the seeds he got from the Toronto Seed Library.
How much have you biked in the last little while?
I stopped counting after about 300 kilometers.
For the team of volunteers, it's a labor of love. Then again, so is gardening.
It can be done while practicing safe social distancing. You can be out there gardening and say hi to your neighbors and just feel a little bit more connected with the people around you.
Ali Chiasson, CBC News, Toronto.
And here are some of the stories we're following tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
Nobody wants to see a resurgence, so we are watching very carefully.
3 more deaths, 50 new cases of COVID-19 since Saturday in BC. Dr. Bonnie Henry says the latest numbers, though, suggest we are getting closer to the point where it will be possible to start lifting some restrictions on daily life and business activity. She says a Made in BC plan for that is in the works.
Our labor has also gone up, and so have the expenses, obviously.
Small businesses can now apply for the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy. The program will cover up to 75% of wages for businesses affected by COVID that have seen a drop in revenue. Some local BC shops hope the subsidy will mean they'll be able to bring some staff they've had to lay off. Among more than 1,600 new COVID-19 cases in Canada today, Quebec's new case tally was the highest and saw an increase for the second day in a row. Still, the province is revealing partial plans for easing COVID restrictions. Alison Northcott looks into when some kids in Quebec could head back to the classroom.
Patricia Claremont's kids are eager to get back to school, but she's nervous about the province's plan.
If we don't succeed this reopening, it would mean that we have done this confining for nothing. And it would be a major feeling of failing.
2 weeks from today, Quebec's premier says primary schools and daycares outside the Greater Montreal area will reopen. In Montreal, the epicenter of Quebec's outbreak, it's a week later on May 19th. High school students won't go back until September.
This reopening will be gradual.
Legault acknowledges the virus has hit long-term care homes hard, but says for those less vulnerable, life must go on.
Primary school children will benefit the most from the remaining school weeks, especially children in difficulties.
It won't be mandatory, and it will only happen if the situation in hospitals remains stable. Schools will have to try to impose physical distancing measures and have classes with no more than 15 students. Daycare teachers will have protective equipment and fewer kids. Patricia Roque is relieved her 2-year-old can soon return to daycare.
I've seen her personality go from an extroverted, bubbly child to a more introverted, withdrawn, and clingy toddler, and it upsets me. She needs to have her peer group.
But teachers' unions have a lot of questions.
I just feel that teachers were not reassured today. You've got these conditions that weren't very good to begin with. Shortage of teachers, really difficult working conditions. And now you've added on top of that COVID-19.
The province says through all of this, public health measures like physical distancing will stay in place and that following them remains crucial. Alison Northcott, CBC News, Montreal.
Ontario revealed a less specific plan today with no dates for restarting anything. But as Jacqueline Hanchen shows us, there were hints of just how long it could take to begin reopening that province.
Don't expect to cheer on actors or athletes in Ontario anytime soon. Sporting events and concerts aren't even part of the province's plan to reopen.
There's no one wants to open up the economy more than I do.
Premier Doug Ford is eager but cautious.
We've come so far with this fight, and we just don't want to give up.
Along with ensuring capacity in hospitals and ramping up contact tracing, the province says new cases must go down consistently for 2 to 4 weeks. Then stage 1 can start, with reopening select workplaces and allowing small gatherings. Next, more workplaces and bigger gatherings. And the final stage includes all workplaces. But the province didn't say which businesses will be allowed to open first or when.
I think it's actually pretty wise to be hesitant about making declarations about what's going to happen when, because, you know, if we know anything, it's that this is not a predictable situation.
Still, some want to know more so they can start preparing.
Access to PPE, or the personal protective equipment for all involved, is the main issue here.
Many dentists donated their equipment to hospital workers.
And now, as those restrictions are going to loosen up, the profession and all dentists across the province are going to be looking to gain access.
And we'll have to sterilize absolutely everything after every client, give them a new gown, of course.
This hairstylist wants to wait until the case numbers come down so he can feel a little safer.
I don't think I would like to go back as of yet.
So the province's big picture timeline isn't the only one that matters. It could still take longer to build back the confidence of workers and customers. Jacqueline Hansen, CBC News, Toronto.
Okay, we know so many businesses and companies are struggling right now, many cutting service or closing altogether. But one in particular is relied on a lot. Translink has said it's losing $75 million a month. One reason, ridership being down, meaning the future of transit in the Lower Mainland may never be the same. With us tonight is Translink CEO Kevin Desmond. Mr. Desmond, the bus routes Translink suspended or announced it is suspending make up less than 4% of ridership. If the financial future and picture is so bleak, why weren't these cut sooner?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on tonight. And indeed, we are unfortunately losing a significant amount of money because ridership is down a lot, about 83%, and gas tax revenue is down because people aren't driving. For the first month or so of the crisis, we were just struggling to try to figure out how to reimagine providing service to essential workers. Even with that 83% reduction in ridership, we estimate we're still transporting over 75,000 individuals a day on about 250,000 trips. And we had to reduce the capacity, the effective capacity of our buses before any service reductions by about 70%. A few weeks ago, we eliminated every other seat on the bus. We blocked off every other seat on the bus to help enforce social distancing, and we are trying to discourage standees on the bus. So right off the bat, these routes or our service was the effective capacity was reduced. We also then had to try to understand what the patterns of ridership are. We don't want to disenfranchise anybody. So these routes that were discontinued were suspended last week, and then the additional routes which would be suspended in the middle of May. Yes, they do in fact provide less ridership than other routes, and they can help save some money. But we needed to best understand where the patterns are. We didn't want to leave too many people out in the cold, as it were.
Well, I know Translink has several big-ticket projects on the docket. So how do you guarantee those projects, like Broadway Subway, Surrey SkyTrain extension, et cetera, will move forward given this financial picture?
Well, look, I can't guarantee anybody anything at this point in time. We're about 6 weeks in this crisis. we have a long, long way to go. We estimate our revenue loss this year to be anywhere in the neighborhood of $600 to $700 million, and additional red ink next year as well. Right now, we're very much focused on how we can contain some of our spending, how we can work with partners to recover at least portions of those revenues. And we have to make a choice. We have to make decisions about where and how our spending can support both the provision of service pre-COVID and the major capital projects. Now, I will say, those capital projects, number one, they're heavily funded by senior government. Roughly 70 to 80% of the Broadway subway, for example, is funded by senior government. The same 70 to 80% roughly is funding the Surrey Langley SkyTrain, number one. Number two, those projects were justified at the time their business cases were reviewed, and in the future, I believe they'll still be justified, even as we understand how life and society changes post-COVID. And number three, those projects create jobs. They're very typical. Public sector infrastructure spending is viewed as a stimulus to economies. So pulling back on big infrastructure projects, certainly at this time, I think is premature to be thinking about.
Fair enough. Final question here. Bonnie Henry said today that transmission in public transit is very rare around the world. Could some of the changes made to public transit be eased soon? You know, talking things like backdoor boarding, of course, which forced buses to be free.
Great question. And, you know, we are engaged with public health and with Dr. Henry and listening to Dr. Henry each and every day. As I said, we're starting to think about this recovery phase. How do we start inviting our customers back with confidence in a public transit system? We need to take guidance from public health, but we also have to do our own thinking as an industry and here in Metro Vancouver about how to get people confident to take public transit again. Public transit is going to be here when this is all over, even after there's a vaccine and our world begins to return to normal. We want to come back strong, but we also have to be cognizant in the meantime that people might need to interact with these public services a little bit different. So we want to take leadership and guidance from public health, and we want to incorporate that into a new way, perhaps, of providing service so that people have a comfort that they can come back and take a bus and take SkyTrain.
Are you worried people are going to be fearful and will avoid bus and SkyTrain for a long time, even after restrictions are eased?
Well, you know, my colleagues throughout the world, this is what we're all thinking about, is how this crisis might change how people interact with public transit in major urban centers like Vancouver. So it is something we're thinking about. You know, this new social distancing world that we're all getting used to, how does that affect public transit? How does it affect my individual decision to take transit? Do I have an alternative? So we have to be thinking about all the different steps we can take to bring people back to taking public transit. I'm absolutely convinced that public transit is still going to play a very, very important and vital function. And those 1.5 million people a day that were taking transit pre-COVID, sooner or later, they're going to want to come back to a really strong system that they have confidence in using every day.
Translink CEO Kevin Desmond, thank you so much for being on the show tonight.
Thank you.
It's coming up on 6:43, and there's a live look at downtown Vancouver tonight. The sun is still out. Pretty decent day, in fact, on the south coast, but will the sun return tomorrow? We'll find out in Brett's forecast, which is next. Overnight flooding has officials in Fort McMurray, Alberta, asking for help from the federal government. More than 200 people there and in surrounding areas have been forced from their homes.
There's a boil water advisory as Rafi Bujikanian reports the pandemic is complicating an already difficult situation.
It took just one night.
It was something to see.
Brenda McLean couldn't quite believe her eyes.
The river flowing a different direction and saw it going backwards instead of going ahead.
The cause? Chunks of ice blocking the Athabasca River during its spring thaw.
The areas downtown were kind of creeping closer and closer to my spot.
Joseph and Virga's apartment building was about to be flooded when a couple of Good Samaritans swung by and got him out of there.
These two guys in the boat was like, "Hey man, you need to get evacuated?"
More than 10,000 people are in need of help in Fort McMurray and surrounding areas. Now, due to the coronavirus pandemic, unemployment is soaring, which has forced some to use the local food bank.
COVID has sort of created its own sort of microcosm of how we're dealing with things.
Dan Edwards says another problem is that the food bank itself has been damaged by the water.
There will likely be food loss, but at this point, I don't know what that is going to equate to.
Meanwhile, the municipality is asking Ottawa for military support as it juggles other emergencies.
The fact that flooding season and in due course forest fire season is coinciding with coronavirus in Canada is posing some special challenges.
Challenges like observing coronavirus protocols during this crisis.
There are considerations, for example, in evacuation centres that we are considering the physical distancing measures and sanitation measures that need to be put in place.
In the meantime, with hotels almost full, some residents are being lodged at oil sands work camps for now. Rafi Bujikanian, CBC News, Edmonton.
And meteorologist Brett Soderholm joins us now. Conditions not great in Fort Mac, Brett.
No, especially because of the warm temperatures. That was predominantly what set everything in motion on Saturday. The town got up to over 20 degrees, which is pretty unusual for this time of year. And when you combine that with ice that was blocking the Athabasca River, you get the situation that we just saw there. Now, I do want to take you through what happened here because this is a pretty rare event in terms of what actually happened. Right now, if you look at this map here, the Athabasca River, this would generally flow from the southwest to the northeast. This ended up, though, encountering an ice jam, which was just a big collection of ice that prevented the river from flowing as normal. So instead, the river flow actually reversed direction, and this caused flooding in town, as we just saw there. And this would happen, say, once every 20 years. This is certainly not a normal protocol for them, and they would expect normally for these ice jams to not really be an issue. They would instead expect the ice to be breaking up as it normally would. So quite an impressive situation here, and one that we're going to have to carefully watch unfold. Of course, back on this side of the mountains, we are, of course, worried about flooding within the interior of BC. At this point in time, a bit of good news to be sharing is that conditions are going to be looking relatively stable in terms of the fact that we're not looking at extreme swings in temperature, though we are expecting a big system to be bringing widespread rain to the coast. So anywhere from Haida down to southern portions of Vancouver Island, all in this together. Dry conditions expected, though, for the Caribou, the Chilcotin, and the Kootenays. Now, in terms of the timing of our rain here in the south coast, it is worth mentioning that the rest of tonight and into the evening is going to be relatively dry. We're not looking like any showers until essentially tomorrow into the late morning into the early afternoon. Now, these are going to come on quite quickly and then dissipate fairly quickly as well, and they're not going to be amounting to more than, say, about 5 millimeters or so. Temperature-wise, we're going to be very close to where we should be, a little bit on the cool side because of all that increased cloud cover and some of that rain, but if you pay attention, all of the warmth is going to be in the interior. Look at that, parts of the Okanagan getting closer to the mid-20s. Now, as far as a 5-day forecast is concerned here in Vancouver, it is going to be a little unsettled for the next couple of days. We're looking at a bit of a dry spell from Thursday into Friday, and Friday is going to be the first day of May, so that will put an end to a remarkably dry period of weather here in the month of April in Vancouver.
All right, Brett, thank you very much. Well, we want to pass along congratulations to a couple of our CBC Vancouver colleagues because CBC Vancouver photojournalists have won National Photography Awards from the News Photographers Association of Canada.
Yes, huge congratulations to Ben Nelms. He was awarded Photojournalist of the Year in the 13th Annual National Pictures of the Year Awards competition for a portfolio of work. Look at these beautiful photos. He's previously been nominated for multiple awards, winning for Photo Story of the Year in 2012.
And Maggie McPherson was awarded first place in the personality category for her intimate portraits of Stephen Red Robinson, a former resident of Oppenheimer Park. Maggie and Ben are amazing. We're thrilled that they are with us, and congratulations to both of you tonight.
Well, how a teen from Mississauga got the star role in a new Netflix series that's pushing boundaries. It's coming up.
This is a call out to any junior scavenger hunters. CBC Vancouver's digital scavenger hunt is taking place April 27th until May 1st. Kids of all ages can take part in this scavenger hunt from home. Participate every day for more chances to win a limited edition CBC Vancouver backpack full of prizes. Plus, you could score an invite to an exclusive online concert with Will Strout from Will's Jams. For more info, head to cbc.ca/scavenger hunt.
Well, a Canadian teenager is the star of a new comedy series on Netflix, a role she won after applying online with no professional acting experience.
Zuleika Nethu has more on her big break and how the series hopes to be the vicarious high school experience young people need right now.
This year, we're rebranding. We are glamorous women of color who deserve a sexy high school life.
She's living a teenager's dream. Maitreyi Ramakrishnan answered a casting call put out by actor-producer Mindy Kaling on social media last year, and to her surprise, got a response.
I read that email thinking like, okay, the standard must have been set low. Like, I wasn't too excited. I was like, okay, like this is like an automated email.
Far from it. The Mississauga native was chosen from 15,000 hopefuls to play the lead in the new teen comedy Never Have I Ever. Her only previous acting experience, a high school production of Chicago.
I mean, it could have gone so badly.
Series co-creator Lang Fisher says they took a chance and it paid off.
Yeah, she brought a freshness.
Are you Princess Jasmine?
Never Have I Ever follows first-generation Indian-American Devi.
Hey gods, it's Devi Vishal Kumar.
A teenager caught between two cultures and reeling from the death of her father.
You just seem lost. You look like an Indian Kardashian.
The Netflix series comes as the streaming service reports nearly 16 million new subscribers amid global lockdowns. It might take on added resonance, too, as physical distancing has deprived many teens of hanging out together and canceled milestones like prom.
It's really stressful for teens to be able to see yourself represented and to be able to maybe think about some of the issues that you're also dealing with. You know, being able to see that represented on screen, I think, is helpful.
I think we can all agree that last year sucked for a number of reasons.
What I hope is that teenagers watching this will see that there's like light at the end of the tunnel.
Something Ramakrishnan says teens like herself could use now more than ever. Zuleika Nethu, CBC News, Los Angeles.
Wow. And she was chosen from 15,000 applicants. That's just amazing. Never Have I Ever. Anita, I hear it's maybe a little risque.
I mean, a little risque, but that's what all the kids are talking about these days, right? All the things, all the topics that are covered in this. So who are we to say it's risque, I guess? That's all the time we have.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's all the time we have for tonight. You can always find our news program online, cbc.ca/BC. Dan is here at 11 o'clock. But before we go, I'm very excited about this. Some video of a great horned owl mom and her 3 fluffy chicks. These photos taken by CBC listener Claude Rio near Vernon in the Okanagan. Oh, so cute. Have a good night.